Erev Tov, Rabbatai. There is something on Shabbat that people do to keep the food hot, whether it's for the night or for the day, the next day. We know that they put it on the plata, they put it on the stove, things like this, yes, but there's also another thing they do, which is called hatmana. Right? What is hatmana? Insulation. You ever see somebody who does this? So what they do is, they cover the pot with something from all sides to keep it hot, so the heat shouldn't escape. In the older generation, they used to do this. Our grandmothers in Israel, they still do it today. A lot of people are doing it. It's a common thing. But there are certain rules about this. That a person, if he does insulation, hatmana, he has to know how to do. So number one, right? You're not allowed to do insulation on Shabbat. Right? What does that mean? To cover from all sides the pot. What do they cover it with? In the old days, they used to use all kinds of things, like sand, dirt, things like this, right? Ashes, I don't know, God knows what. All kinds of things they used to cover it with. Nowadays, nobody does that, right? Nobody covers the pot with these kinds of things. Who does that? So the only thing we do today is that we use the blankets, right? Or smartut, triapka, things like this, right? We cover it like that with these things. So, as we said, right, on Shabbat, you're not allowed to do hatmana. So why is that? The Rabbi said, right, that if you do hatmana on Shabbat, you may come to also, stir up the fire, the coals, and so therefore the Rabbi said, don't do hatmana on Shabbat. Insulation. Right. So, therefore, on Shabbat, you're not allowed to cover the pots with the, blankets and, all kinds of, rags, things like this. You're not allowed to cover it up like that. So, what about before Shabbat, right? Are you allowed to do that on before Shabbat, Erev Shabbat? And the answer is yes, you're allowed to do it on Erev Shabbat. So what does that mean? A lot of people do this, Erev Shabbat, if they want to have a chamin, pacholent in the morning, they cover it with a blanket, the pot, so it stays nice and warm, cooks good, nice heat, everything good, and then in the morning, they open it up, right, and they serve it like that. So, are you allowed to do this Erev Shabbat? Before Shabbat, yes, it's allowed to do. As we said, with blankets, right, with the rags and things like this, yes, you're allowed to do for sure. But that's because it doesn't add any heat; it just retains the heat when you cover it with these materials. But there are certain substances, if you cover them, they would add heat to the dish. Those things you're not allowed to use. We don't have them anyway today. We don't use them anyway. So it's not really a big concern, We don't have this kind of thing today. Who covers this pot, right, with the sand, or things like this, right, today. Who's going to bring sand into the house, cover his pot, right? Nobody does that today. So we're not worried about that. But the thing is like this, right, that there are certain rules also, leniencies about this that we have to know. Which is that if you covered the pot before Shabbat, right, now let's say, right, you want to serve the food from the pot. You want to open it up, right, the blanket, whatever. You want to open it up, serve the food, and then you want to put the cover back on, to keep it hot for later. Somebody else is going to eat, whatever, right? Are you allowed to do this? The answer is yes. Why? Why is that? Because it's the same insulation, continuation of what you insulated before Shabbat. It's a continuation. It's not something new. It's not a new insulation. It's a continuation of the old insulation. So therefore, you are allowed to cover, if you open it up, right, just to serve it, you can put the cover back on and keep it hot. That's one thing. Another interesting thing is, a lot of people don't notice this, by the way. Even rabbis, who sometimes read these halachot and they also teach them, and write books about them. Sometimes they don't realize one thing. That if you know the Hebrew language, the word hatmana, what does it mean? Insulation. Right. So there is a word in Hebrew to cover something, right? How do you say that? Lechasot. Cover. Right? But when you're matmin, that means something else. What's the difference? Hatmana is not kisui. Okay, so there, right, he's saying good. Right, so what does that mean? Hatmana means that it's not just covered on the top, it's covered on all sides. Understand? Tamun. Right? It's like burial, you bury it in there. So therefore, if you just cover the pot on the top, right, with the blanket or with the rag, that's not called hatmana. That's mutar. You're allowed to do that even on Shabbat. That's not really a problem, Hatmana is only when you cover from all the sides and on the top also. That's called hatmana. So a lot of people don't notice this, but this is the bemet the halakha. So therefore, if you want to, right, let's say like you got a plata, right? You got a big plata. So on the plata you got like 4 pots over there, 4 things going on. You got some rice over there, you got some meat, whatever, right? All kinds of things. Fish, ba. So what you can do is, before Shabbat, you put the blanket, right, on top of all of them. Right? Now, is that hatmana? According to what we said, no, it's just covering, right? Why? Because it's not covered on the sides. Understand? It's not covered on the sides. Yeah, just on top. That's a kisui. So therefore, a person can do it like that before Shabbat, and then he can do it again on Shabbat also, because it's not called hatmana. Hatmana is only when it's covered from all sides. That's called hatmana. This is what is forbidden. That's why a lot of people make mistakes with this, Also, let me ask you another question. Right? What about if you have a pot, right? And you cover it with the lid. Right? The lid, the cover of the pot. Is that called hatmana?
No.
Why? Why not? You're closing it. Right?
You want to cover it, you don't.
Right, but it also has the walls, right? Of the pot, and now you got the top. So it's totally covered. Right? Is that called hatmana? So the answer is no. You're right. So what's the reason why? The reason is because hatmana means you put something on top of the cover of the pot, right? Something extra. That's hatmana, right? The pot itself, the lid of the pot, is not called hatmana. That's not hatmana. Another question, people ask about this, about the rules of hatmana is, what about if he takes the pot, right, and he puts it into the oven? Is that called hatmana? Oven, yeah. As we said right before, are you allowed to put something back in the oven on Shabbat? Not really, right? You're not allowed to do that. Asur. Why? Because it looks like you're cooking. Even if it's fully cooked, people don't know that. So it's mait ayin. Looks like you're cooking, But now the thing is, we already said, right, that Boris has a special oven, right? He didn't show us. He didn't bring it. Can you bring it to show us? Yes. Right, what company is that?
Monogram.
What is it?
Monogram.
Oh, European? Maybe. Okay. Because in Europe they make them, these kinds of ovens. In France, why? Because they import them to Israel. They sell them in Israel. It's a very, So I had one when I was there. Cost me an arm and a leg, but it was a nice oven, really. It was a good oven, It's called Sauder. A French company, Sauder. Anyway, we're not making commercials now for French companies, right? Especially after they're not so friendly with us anymore. They're not so nice to us. We don't want to give them any favors, right? Macaron and all these guys, Imach Shema. So anyway, right, as we said, there are special ovens that are made for Shabbat. So what's special about them? The special is that it's a low temperature, not yatzolerebo. It cannot cook, just warms. Number one. Number two, also, it has a constant heat, right? No thermostat. It doesn't change the heat at all. It stays on one heat all Shabbat. One temperature. So, therefore, you are allowed to use this oven on Shabbat, right? That's what it says in the Ramah, in the Shulchan Aruch. You can use it. Because since it's not yad solered, well, it's not so hot, it's never going to cook, so it doesn't look like you're cooking because the temperature is too low. Okay, fine. So now the question is like this, right? If I put it inside there on Shabbat, right? I have my special oven like Boris has, right? Put it in there. Is this called hatmana? This is the question. Because now it's covered with the oven. Right? The pot is one layer, And then another layer is the oven itself, the walls of the oven. Is that called hatmana? So the answer is no, it's not called hatmana. Hatmana is not like that, right? You're putting something in the oven is never called hatmana. It's not called insulation. So what is that called? You're just warming it up, right? Or cooking whatever it is you want to do, right, with the oven. That's something else, right? Nobody does hatmana with an oven. Oven is done with, outside substance, which covers it. So therefore, it's not called hatmana. But there is one way, right, that it could be called hatmana. You know what it is? This is the only way. If you put it directly, right, on the heat, on the ash, on the fire, on the coals, whatever it is you're using, if you put it directly on the coals, right, and then you cover it, that's called hatmana. That's what it says in the Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, a case like that, you're not allowed to do. If it's directly on the fire, right, the pot, that would be called hatmana. But just putting it in the oven, on the shelf, what I mean, one of the right things there, one of the layers there, that's not called hatmana. It's not on the fire. The fire is down there, below, whatever, right? Heating element, whatever it is, right? Gas, whatever. Doesn't matter. It's down below. It's not, or up above. But it's not touching the pot. Right? This thing. So therefore, in a case like that, it's not called hatmana. So there are rules about hatmana, what is mutar, what is asur. But in general, as we said, right? Covering it with before Shabbat, right? With a blanket or some rags. And then opening it, and then closing it again. If you're not really covering all the sides, it's mutar. Also, as we said, right, if you're just taking out the food and then, right, you want to put it back, it's mutar. ברוך ה' לעולם, אמן אמן. רבי חנניה בן עקשיא אומר, אז הקדוש ברוך הוא לעזור כל ישראל, לפיכך ירבה להם תורה ומצוות שונה בבני חפץ, למען צדקו יגדיל תורה בידי. אמן.